Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Becky McNattin, along with host Tara Martini. We're glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health. And today we have guest Emily Higgins joining us. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, Becky.
We're so glad to have you
sweetie.
here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, we're glad to have you on the show. So often we hear as therapists that there aren't words. We hear this quote, there aren't words. And although I love words and very much enjoy immersing in them, I definitely respect that there are times when words fall pretty short. And definitely also there are mental health needs for individuals who don't have language capacity. We've been super excited to have you on the show since you are a dance movement therapist. And likely, I'm thinking there are many listeners who have not even heard of this kind of therapeutic modality before. Mm-hmm. So before we jump into the specifics on dance movement therapy, tell us a little bit about you, Emily.
Sure. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor and a registered dance movement therapist. I did grow up in Wisconsin, but I found myself in the fabulous state of 10,000 lakes, and I love it here. With my free time, I do love to cook, paint, and travel, and of course, dance. I grew up a dancer, so that's actually what led me to wanting to pursue dance movement therapy.
What a great way to integrate some loves for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Tell us what dance movement therapy is and what a dance movement therapist does.
Yes, I can definitely talk about that. Dance movement therapy is the use of movement to promote emotional, social, cognitive and physical integration for an individual for the purpose of improving their health and well-being.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So dance movement therapy, you kind of mentioned this, people might not have ever heard about it before. And that is actually pretty common because dance movement therapy falls under the expressive creative arts therapy umbrella.
Okay.
And technically dance movement therapy is one of the newer modalities under that umbrella. So that umbrella includes dance, music, art, drama, and poetry therapy.
So there may not be a lot of you out there.
Yeah, there's a small
it's newer.
pool of us.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's small, but it's growing. So, that's a good thing. What does a dance movement therapist do? I think I have the best job in the world. But a dance movement therapist, we use movement to observe, assess, and provide interventions for clients through movement.
And how do you decide what the interventions might be?
Ooh, that is a really good question, and I knew you were going to ask that. So when I am working with a client and we are in the movement space, I am looking at 4 different things.
Okay.
I'm looking at the function of their movement, how they communicate through their movement, developmental patterns, how their body actually moves.
Okay.
And then lastly, how they express themselves through their movement. So with those 4 kind of things in mind, when I am working with a client, I'm really observing them and watching them, and I am giving verbal cues as well. But I'm just really assessing their body, seeing if something looks like it's maybe being held in a certain part of their body, or they might do a certain gesture, a certain action, and I might just, as they're moving, and we've kind of built this relationship, like, what was that for you?
Okay, so you're asking questions maybe while they're moving.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, or sometimes prompting, or sometimes there's not a whole lot of talk happening, and the client is just experiencing and moving.
Okay.
So it is very person-centered in the fact that you are really trying to meet the client where they're at and just seeing what their body is going to do that day.
Okay.
So do you typically start, before you do the actual dance and movement therapy, do you start with talk therapy and kind of building that relationship before, or how does it? Let's find out after the break.
Pause there. Yeah. It's a great discussion and super important to explore.
Yes.
So table that. Right now we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we talk through more specifics around dance movement therapy and how this can be a helpful tool in your life. Thank you for tuning in to Feels Out Loud. We will be right back.
You gotta find the people.
Hey, welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Tara Martini along with Becky McNattin. Let's get right back to our discussion about dance movement therapy with the incredible Emily. So, right before the commercial break, I asked you a question about whether you simply just jump into the actual dance and movement therapy interventions, or do you start with talk therapy and kind of building that relationship?
That is a great question. Typically, we do start with talk therapy and start building that therapeutic relationship. As we know, the body, that's a very vulnerable place to go, right?
sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So definitely building that therapeutic relationship is important. I will say, however, it does also depend on the readiness of the client. So, for example, I have done work in the past with people who have had movement backgrounds. Not that you need to have a movement background to do dance movement therapy, but I have. So, for example, those individuals may have been more ready to jump into actually moving and utilizing movement as a therapeutic intervention.
And maybe came in actually looking for that specific.
Exactly.
So
Right.
they're
Yes.
coming in with the anticipation of,
we're going to
that's what I'm gonna
move and
do.
this is what we're going to do. And usually with those individuals, we'll still do more talking in the beginning, those first few sessions and stuff, just to kind of gain a sense of just where they're at, their history of things.
Right, and building rapport.
Yeah. So it's really dependent on the client, but typically we do talk and build that relationship first.
So, Emily, we talk in clinical work about how emotions can be stored in our body. And a few weeks ago on the show, actually, we did a whole show on the physical impact of unprocessed emotions. And there's a quote by Tina Urfer, who we are resides not just in our minds, but in our bodies. Through dance movement therapy, we become more of who we really are. So I'll say it one more time. Who we are resides not just in our minds, but in our bodies. Through dance movement therapy, we become more of who we really are. What would you say about this quote?
Oh, I do love that quote, and I completely agree that it is an integration of our mind and body. So a lot of the time, I think we as humans, and maybe this has my own bias to it, I feel like we separate our mind and body.
Yeah.
And we kind of think of them as almost like a head versus heart type of saying. But in reality, the mind and body are inseparable, so therefore they are interconnected. And because this connection exists, changes in the body can reflect changes in the mind and vice versa.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
So-
that makes total sense.
Yeah, so it's like if we can find ways to connect our mind and body and have them actually talk and have a conversation, the more we can feel more integrated and authentic as a person.
And as we talked about in that show a few weeks ago, we may process stored emotions that you likely see with frequency as a dance movement therapist, how it's been a tool for us to disconnect mind and body because we're trying to not feel those feels, and we're putting them somewhere in our bodies, and so it can be quite a process to connect them. Scary because we maybe don't even know what we've stored. But what we get at is an actual processing. One way of processing we talked about a few weeks ago. It is the utilization of movement and then we're releasing what's been stored, which is really cool.
Well, and it's interesting. You said something very important there is that disconnection of the mind and body is a protective factor. It's a way that we protect ourselves as human beings. And we as human beings, this is why we do struggle with connecting to the body, is we like to be logical and we like to be up in our brain.
Yes, we do.
So when our body is maybe feeling a type of way or giving us an unwanted sensation, we typically just go to our brain and we're like, I'm sad, I'm this. And I'm like, but what else is happening in your body? And it's not connecting further down.
There's so many other layers to it.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, well, I can think about several times in my own life where I could not explain to other people what I was feeling. And that, even the things that come to mind right now are as an adult. Not a child. And I think about the complexity of life experiences and how using only words can get quite limiting.
Yes.
Sometimes both the high intensity of mental health symptoms actually causes us to be less verbal, in addition to where we stored it.
Oh, yeah.
That when it's so intense, it can cause us to be less verbal. And then certainly for children or those with any cognitive challenges, verbalization can also be difficult. Like, words really don't cut it. And so how is dance movement therapy helpful in those circumstances?
So in dance movement therapy, that's a really good question. We really believe that there is so much power in nonverbal. And actually, movement is the very first form of communication that we have. It actually starts in utero when we are in our mother's belly. We are moving. We are connecting with our mom.
Wow.
Movement.
Well,
that is the first
sense.
language that we have is movement. Isn't that like mind-blowing to think about?
Yep, just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to think about
So
what that really means.
Yeah. So what does that mean? It means that we don't actually have to have words to process what we're feeling. We can use movement. We can use movement to help us just even feel through an emotion. Doesn't mean that we have to fully come to a conclusion of why something happened or what we think about it. But movement in that nonverbal way, like you said, when we don't have words to express it, we're like, okay, where do I feel that in my body? What do I even want to do with that? And that's where dance movement therapy comes in. It is a creative approach that definitely puts people out of their comfort zone. But I think if you're willing to just notice what's happening in your body and let the therapist help facilitate where that's going and what to do with it, it can be really powerful.
Cool.
And it's one of those things, too, if you think about it, like you said, I think our listeners, for those who themselves or have children that have some challenges, what you're presenting and sharing with them is maybe the first opportunity they've ever heard that there doesn't have to be verbalization, right? You can see how someone is and, you know, create an intervention without any words, which is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So on that note, I would love to know, and I'm sure the listeners would too, what does a quote unquote typical dance movement session look like? And I know every person's different, but just kind of like in general.
Yeah, I can definitely speak on that. And you hit it right on the head, Tara. It will be individualized to each client or person that comes into the movement space. But I do say there is kind of a template that we do follow. So typically when a client comes in, we will do a verbal check-in. I'll just see where they're at that day. We're going to do a body part warm-up where I lead them through warming up different parts of their body, just kind of like if you were to take a gym class or something like that. They're going to have you warm up before you do the activity, right? Because we don't want to pull anything. We kind of want to see where our body's feeling.
Got it.
Then I'm going to provide a movement intervention based on what the client is bringing in or maybe an ongoing topic that we're working on. And then after that, we're going to cool down and we're going to verbally process what happened. So that's like a template of kind of the big checkpoints. And sometimes some of those things might not happen depending on what the client is bringing in. But that's
And when you say verbally process what's happened, you're saying, how did that feel for you?
Yeah.
What was going on in your arms at that time?
Yeah.
Or so you're asking some questions about whatever the intervention was.
Yeah, or so that's kind of why I referenced in the beginning, there is talking or prompting that might happen from me, but there are moments in time in the session where there's going to be no talking and just moving. And that's when at the end of session, I might be like, oh, I noticed your torso got really tense. What was happening there for you? What were you thinking? What was going on? And it just gives them a second to, and they might not have an answer, but it gives them a moment to self-reflect and be like, what was that? Was that anything? I don't know.
And okay if they don't have the words for it.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
So when people are moving, are they moving to music? Are you moving to something you've shown them?
That's a really good question. Well, excuse me. To better answer that, it depends. Let's talk about music first. Music is something in dance movement therapy that we have to be very careful about because music can very much influence our movement.
Sure. It's an intervention all by itself. When we talk about music therapy, is literally a different modality.
Yes. So, for example, and this is where it kind of is like my job to feel it out and be with the client. I do have some clients that very much love music, and music actually supports them and helps them. So I typically try to pick music that doesn't have words or is more instrumental, something that might support them through their movement process but not overtake the process of what's happening internally with their emotions and
That
their
makes
connections.
sense.
Yeah. And then actually there's a lot of time there's no music. I know that kind of sounds funny. And I will say that's more so with clients where we've built that rapport, they are feeling comfortable, and sometimes I might move with them.
Okay.
So that's actually a technique that we do is mirroring. Mirroring can be very powerful in a dance movement therapy session. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. But there are times when I am moving with the client, or I might be demonstrating like, hey, we're going to do this movement scale, which we could talk about those on another episode. And I'm going to do this with you. This is what it
Interesting.
looks like. And then they'll practice it with me, and then we'll kind of keep doing it and see where it kind of turns into.
I am putting myself in the space of potentially having someone mirror back to me what my movements are and how insightful that would be.
And powerful.
How huge that would create some feelings of seeing myself outside of myself and what that would feel like. I'm just putting myself in that space right now.
Oh, it's amazing.
of what that offers, even in terms of a self-exploration, that people might not realize what their movements are.
Yeah, or what they look like, or sometimes, you'll reflect something back and they're like, wow, that's what I look like when that happens? It's like,
Oh.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, well said.
Now, for the listeners out there, because I think there's just so many questions associated with this, but for people who are not therapists themselves and they're seeking something like this, when it comes to dance and movement, is there, when thinking of what brings a person into therapy, are there specific things that you typically focus on, or could anyone who is seeking therapy use dance and movement? As in, let's say it's grief, or let's say it's a life transition. Is this open to everybody?
That is a really good question. Actually, the answer is dance movement therapy is really open for anybody, as long as the individual is open to the idea of a creative approach to processing their experiences, really. There are certain populations that it can be more beneficial for, but overall anybody can benefit from it because we constantly live in our body all the time.
Right.
Our body is constantly moving. Like our heart is a 3-dimensional movement. Our breath is a 3-dimensional movement. Us just sitting here, you could be sitting still and no one is ever actually perfectly still. Your breath is still your 3-dimensional movement. You're constantly moving.
That makes so much sense.
Girl, you're blowing minds today.
If you're a human and you're living and breathing, dance movement therapy could be beneficial for you.
That's so good to know.
Yeah.
That's excellent to know. If people are open to the idea of perhaps something besides talk therapy or in addition to, because it isn't void of talk therapy. You're still doing that. It's talk therapy and which is what we also say about the clinic that you work at, but be coming together. It makes me think about, there's a quote by Marion Chase: movement is the medium in which we live our lives. And you just referenced this because you said we are always moving. So if we are existing, we are moving. And so they say movement is the medium in which we live our lives. And it makes me think about, if that's the case, if it's the medium by which we live our lives, then what do you think about movement needing to be the way we also process our lives?
Wow.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that is a loaded question, but
because it would almost seem like it's required.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. I was going to say it is a necessity actually that we utilize movement to process our experience. A lot of the time, though, I think we live in a society where we don't talk about that. We talk about movement as like fitness or like we're going to move to feel better,
right.
But it's like, oh, we actually need to look at movement to help us understand our triggers, patterns of living, how we interact with other people. It's all through movement.
Yeah.
So, we need it. Absolutely.
Because it would leave me thinking that processing, if that is verbal only, we leave the processing in a cerebral place then.
Yep.
And
we don't bring it down.
If movement is the way we live our lives, we're completely missing an entire sector of something if we're keeping it only in a head-based space.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting you talk about that because I think about it in this kind of way, and sometimes when I work with my clients is it's like the thought or the feeling or the experience starts up in their mind. And then it's like, okay, how can we translate that from our mind into our body? And as we know, when we are trying to repattern ourselves, a lot of it comes to what are we then doing with the information we have to then try to do something different in our bodies and with our bodies.
Got it.
So, yeah, exactly that. If we leave it in our mind, it almost stops there. And then it's like the thought is there, but we haven't finished the sentence.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
So
good.
it's like the thought is there. Yeah, and it's good. The nugget is there.
Yep.
But then we have to do something with that. And if we don't do something different with that,
Right.
change is not going to happen.
Right. It's fascinating how you're approaching it, because now you have both of us just our minds blown going, wow, movement is essential, right, in life. But yet, like you said earlier, this is a somewhat new medium in which people use for therapy, which almost doesn't make sense, right? Because it is at the core of how we process and how we feel.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring that up because dance is first and foremost, it was a ritual, right? Ritual was really where dance kind of started. And then it turned into obviously like performance and all these other things. And what you're saying there, it's so interesting that it's taken us so long to realize that we have had this like wonderful thing of like dance and movement, but that it can be used therapeutically and not just be creative, which creative is also great too. But it's like you can utilize it and it has so many benefits. So
it is. And so many people think probably when it comes, they think of movement related to like yoga and, different exercises where, oh my gosh, like this is something totally different that has such a huge impact.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think there was a question about myths around dance movement therapy, and that is one of the myths is that it's a dance class or that you have to have dance experience or be an amazing dancer. And all I tell people is you just have to be willing to be creative and want to move, whatever that means in your body.
Well, and in part, I hear you saying today, your existing is already moving.
Yeah.
Right.
So you just have to be willing to show up as you.
Yeah, exactly.
In a session. Yeah. And then you're already doing dance movement therapy. And one of the huge beliefs in it is seeing your body as a community, an entire community, a wholeness of that, and connecting the different parts of self in that community. And so if you are existing, you are already moving. And so in that, you are already a fit for dance movement therapy.
Exactly.
Right.
Like
everybody's a perfect fit.
Yeah. Everybody's a perfect fit.
Yeah, you just got to show up and come through the door.
But I like that you highlight the myths because I think even in my own mind, when I think about dance movement therapy, I think about, I go and do like a dance routine.
Yeah, that's a big thought that people have. 100%.
Or it's interpretive dance.
Yep. Or improv or like these things.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's interesting you bring that up. So there's been lots of discussion of just actually calling it movement therapy. The American Dance Therapy Association, they do call it dance movement therapy, but I will say, and like my own personal belief is some of us in the younger generation, we have been challenging them about the idea of just calling it movement therapy because there is a connotation that happens when people hear the word dance. And some people get very scared about that idea because dancing is already a vulnerable thing anyway. And then you bring in the body and then it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing what now?
Yeah.
So it's interesting you just bring that up and it's just about words, right? But words do impact how we think and feel about that modality.
Oh, absolutely. And choice of words could alleviate that anxiousness that a potential client is feeling, right? Where if it's just, we're going to move and process or whatever it is versus we're going to go and dance.
Yeah.
There is, like you said, a fear associated with dancing for many people.
Yeah. Well, and it's, so when I see clients and I obviously talk to them about that I do dance movement therapy if they're not coming to maybe directly see me for that. And they'll ask questions about it and they're like, ooh, do I have to dance? And I'm like, hey, right now, like I'll talk about them breathing. I'm like, you're moving. You're doing dance movement therapy right now. Did you know?
Yeah.
And they're like,
so powerful.
Oh. They're like, so I don't have to like know a dance.
No,
and, like,
we're not memorizing a YouTube,
I was like,
dance routine.
I was like, you just have to show up and be willing to be creative. And that's all.
Well, and part of what it sounds like people are referencing there, we associate the word dance often with performance.
Yes.
And and I think there are a lot of creative arts that is the modality of sharing.
Yeah,
it's
the end goal, right?
In a concert. It's in a art fair.
Yep.
There's some sort of output or outcome that then we show. And we get scared of performing. And so it sounds like people, I love that they're asking questions about that, because we probably have listeners out there who are thinking, who am I showing the dance to?
No one, just for themselves. This is space for themselves. And yes, I'm a witness in that, but they don't actually do it.
Are there ways, or do families and groups do this together? Is dance movement therapy a thing that you only do with individuals?
No, dance movement therapy can be for individuals, can be for couples, can be for groups. And it can be powerful in any of those avenues, really. It just kind of depends on, again, the client's willingness to show up. I used to do group therapy, dance movement therapy at a hospital, and I missed that group so much. There was just the movement was a space for them to express themselves and heal, but also to connect with one another through movement.
Wow. In such an isolating environment, right? At the hospital where they probably feel really alone.
Yeah, and this group, for example, was a reoccurring group. So a lot of times when we do group dance movement therapy, it's ideal to have reoccurring groups. You don't have to, though. Okay. I've done, little mini sessions and come into a group and, just taught them the basics of what dance movement therapy is and guide them through an experiential. But with this group that I'm referencing, it was a reoccurring group. So it just made it even more special that these individuals had almost their own little dance movement therapy pod where they could come once a week on Wednesday and move with me and another registered licensed dance movement therapist.
Wow.
So
what kinds of ways would they connect via movement?
Yeah, we did a lot of meaning open movement. So this is a good example of this group was meeting for quite some time. So that trust was already built.
And the comfort
and trust was there. So because of that, me and the other facilitator, we would kind of give maybe some verbal prompts or things based on what we were seeing from the group in general. So here's a good example. There was one day we were doing the body part warm up, and once that was over, someone started snapping. And then someone else started clapping. And then they just started creating a rhythm together.
Oh my gosh,
and
just totally impromptu.
Yep, impromptu. And we, of course, encouraged that. We heard the snapping, we heard the clapping, and then I started stomping my feet let's keep going with this.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. And they created a full embodied jam band. Through movement. Goodness. And they all just built off of one another. And that was our whole session.
Wow. And no talking.
No talking. Wow. It just took maybe me or the other therapist initially to be let's keep going with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Just to encourage what was happening.
Well, it's giving him permission in a way of
so we just found rhythms in our body and created a band together through that. And that was our whole session for the hour.
And how did they leave that session versus how they came in?
When they debriefed, everyone was like, yeah, I just feel so much better. They got to connect with one another. They were laughing and giggling. They got to, rhythms are grounding, by the way. So if you're ever feeling ungrounded, put on a song and listen to just the rhythm or try to embody the rhythm.
It's a great tidbit.
Yeah, they felt better. They definitely felt better than when they came in. So
that's amazing. All without saying a word.
All without saying a word other than their name, how they were doing that day, and then what they thought at the end.
That's incredible.
Yep.
It makes me want to try it.
I'm already I need to do a little observation.
Yeah, we could have some more
sign up for dance therapy. I mean, this is just so incredible. And so for what you've shared today, again, for people who before you came on the show had no idea what dance and movement therapy was, is there one thing where you're I wish I could have said that to everybody that you think is important to share?
Yes. I had been thinking about that question beforehand. And honestly, something that I wish, people would know is that dance movement therapy is about movement and just showing up and being yourself.
Okay.
That's it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And a commitment to that.
Yeah.
Well, hearing you talk about it, our listeners aren't in the studio right now, but Tara can see this. You light up.
You do.
It is so...
It is your passion. It is who you are to your core.
I could just... So when you say people need to make a commitment to show up as themselves, obviously people who work with you feel so accepted in that space to show up as themselves because your face just lights up. Mm-hmm. Tell us what you love about it.
Oh, man. Sorry, I'm getting like teary-eyed. Thank you so much. I am very passionate about it. What do I love about dance movement therapy? Oh, gosh. I love how it allows an individual to just be creative, and it can allow them to make connections with themselves or even with others in such a like internal way that, again, words don't cut it for. And because of that, I know I'm going to describe it in this way. It's very magical in the sense of like, I don't know. It's just, that's what I love about it is you can literally sometimes see the shift in the person. Like when I'm observing them, I can like, that's what I love about it is I can see that shift happening or that like, oh, that's that feeling. And like, they're not saying it, but I'm like, okay,
right.
You are now taking what was in your mind and integrating it into your body and actually understanding the connection of what's happening.
Well, part of what I hear you saying, this was just a couple of weeks ago, I led a group around the concept of belonging, and that belonging is something we can't touch, but we can feel. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing because usually we feel what we touch, but it's not something we can touch, but we can feel. And you even talking about the group that you felt the belonging and the connection that happened in that space when people were practicing showing up as themselves. And when you say you see the change, I could just even see it as you're talking right now. What you love is this capacity to be part of being immersed in someone's connection to themselves and other people.
Yeah.
It also is beyond words.
Yeah, 100%.
The experience of being able to feel change is sometimes not a thing we can describe.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing to witness it in people. Well, and I think too, part of it is going off of what Becky said is your energy is just so different in the most beautiful way in that I'm assuming here that the therapist also can make or break a dance and movement therapy session in that your energy is so just like oozing out of you and your kindness where I'm sure that makes people feel more comfortable and willing to be vulnerable where I think of, I'm sure not every experience is like that because you are, other than the person showing up as themselves and willing to be creative, you are the catalyst for change, right?
Yeah.
Which is so incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up because that's something I think about a lot when I am in a dance movement therapy session of like, what does this client need? How can I hold this container for them and show up with the type of energy or, presence that they might need at this moment? And that is always changing. Right. Right.
Do you feel pressure in that sense of like, ooh, I got to show up for them?
Sometimes I will say as years have gone on and letting go of like just like imposter syndrome and those things.
Yes.
I have just noticed just showing up and attuning to them is the best thing I can do. And not putting that, not trying to put pressure on myself, but just be there with the client in the space and it will all be okay.
Well, and just like you said, the imposter syndrome. And we recently had Robin on who said the same thing of that piece. We all feel it right at the beginning of our career. And then you gradually just have sat in it long enough to go, wow, like.
So tell us some specific strategies that might be unique to dance movement therapy.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Some specific strategies. We did talk about mirroring already.
Yeah, okay.
That is a big one that we utilize a lot. Props.
Oh.
Yeah, the use of props. I know that's not one
Tell us more, girl.
Yeah. Props, they can come in all different shapes and sizes, but some typical props that we might use in dance movement therapy are actually scarves. There is a thing called a Lycra spider band. It's literally made out of Lycra material, so that's swimsuit material. And I've utilized those more so in groups. It it kind of reminds you of, like a parachute, right? Yep. Everyone would hold a handle.
Yep. Yeah.
The Lycra band, it has a circle middle, and then it has Lycra pieces, individual strands that come off the circle, and group members connect via those pieces.
Got it.
So we've used that as a way to move with one another. We've used it to feel push and pull.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Props can be very powerful. Props can also help. Sometimes we call props transitional objects, right? Ooh. So they can help the client transition into something that might feel more uncomfortable. So like, what these kids today is called the fidgets,
Yes.
But those are some things specific to dance movement therapy. And then movement scales. That's another thing that we can dive down another day. But movement scales are basically set movement patterns that have been created by dance movement therapists and other, what do you want to call them? Movement analysts.
Okay.
And these movement scales, are a various form of movement patterns, and they are in a certain order, and then you utilize those different movement scales in your session. And those are scales that, because they have certain patterns, I will teach them in those patterns, and I will talk to the client about, why are we doing this? What are we doing it for? And a lot of time, the movement scale is to reorganize our brain and body together.
Okay.
Wow. Typically.
Okay. Makes total sense.
Yes, it does.
And then, as you said, in terms of the session flow, you'd talk about it after you maybe use one of those strategies on what did that feel like? That might inform the next session on do you do it again? Do you try something different? Do you try a different prop?
Yeah.
Got it.
So let's say someone's listening and is like, well, this is just the greatest thing I've ever heard. How does one go about finding someone? It's easier to just Google therapist, right?
Yes.
But a dance and movement therapist, when you say it is a small population, how does one go about searching for someone like you?
That's a great question. Well, if you are looking for a dance movement therapist, you can go to lovely Google and type in the American Dance Therapy Association. It is the first website that will pop up. When you click on it, there is a little tab that says Find a DMT.
Ooh, DMT.
Yeah,
okay.
Dance Movement Therapist.
An American Dance Therapy Association, so it's like a professional board.
Yes.
A professional organization.
Yes.
And also so amazing because not all of our listeners are from the Twin Cities area.
Yes.
And so it's that piece of really you're saying anyone or a lot of people
anybody could go there and it'll pull up Dance Movement Therapist and you can put in what state you're looking, and it'll pull people up.
Okay.
So you could find a dance movement therapist that way. If you are specifically in Minnesota and you are looking, you want to narrow down your search a little bit more, I am the chapter president for the Minnesota
chapter. Of course
chapter.
you are.
So you could find us on Instagram at MNADTA, and you can send me a direct message, and I will certainly answer any questions you have.
Does every dance movement therapist then get put on a registry of sorts?
Yeah, so we're all on the registry. There are registered dance movement therapists and board certified. The only difference is board certified, you can provide supervision.
Okay.
But yeah, we are all on that list, and you can find us and see where you want to go.
Because you all went to school for this thing. You have a degree in this thing. And so for our listeners to know, people who are dance movement therapists are people who get a degree in being able to do clinical work therapeutic work that would bill to insurance.
Yep.
And you also have training specifically in dance and movement. And so then once you get the training, you get put on the website and people can look you up there. Okay.
Can you, before the commercial break, can you share the website again and then the social media piece you said?
Yeah. The website would be the American Dance Therapy Association, and the Instagram page for specifically Minnesota would be MNADTA.
Thank you.
And they literally reach you.
Yeah. They literally would reach me if they messaged me for that account on Instagram. So
you're pretty much famous.
Thank you.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much this has been a fantastic discussion. So much to think about here. We are going to head to a brief commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking through listener questions, Emily. And all things movement therapy beyond what verbal processing is, as we've shared so much about in this segment. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment. We'll be right back.
All you got to do now. In a world full of strangers, you don't know the trust. All you see is danger.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this is the part of the show where we talk through questions from our beautiful listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you'd love for us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. Or you can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com, because we really do want to hear from you and wonder what you're wondering about.
I am really grateful to the listeners who have sent in questions about, I'm going to say, their moments when words don't cut it, and movement-related interventions to help. Our first listener that we selected this question, I think, highlights something we talked about in the last segment, Emily. Mm-hmm. And they say this: I'm a terrible dancer, and I'm self-conscious about it. What would you tell someone who is super apprehensive about dance movement therapy? And before you answer, Emily, I want to just say props to this listener for saying they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, putting it out there.
They're not a good dancer, and so want to know more about what dance movement therapy would be. So what would you say?
I would tell that person that that is okay. You do not need to be a good dancer, and self-consciousness is actually very normal, right? When it comes to just being in our body and or the idea of moving and dancing. So what I usually tell my clients if they feel this way is, like, I am here to hold space for us, and we're going to take things slow. Okay. So a lot of times with this type of client, I will do a lot more moving with them so they don't feel alone in their movement.
Okay. So the modeling.
Yeah, modeling.
The scaffolding.
Just being with them. And if they're still hesitant, kind of like what you were asking, Tara, about, like, do you do any, talk therapy to build that therapeutic relation? We might spend more time talking until they feel comfortable. Or we might do, for example, I call them mini movement interventions in my office where we're still talking, and then I'll be like, hey, like, since we're warming up to the idea of dance movement therapy, let's tap into, like, what just happened? I saw you shift a bunch. Like, let's maybe do a little mini something with that. Mm-hmm. So that's like a way to dip their toes in, and we definitely would not dive in head first.
Right.
Well, and you mentioned this in the last segment, that perhaps one way for this listener to even think about it is less dance, more movement.
Yeah.
So you're not coming in to only dance.
Yep.
Think of it as you are already moving because you're existing.
Yeah.
And one way to maybe make it more approachable would be thinking about it in a low-key movement sense.
Yeah, or like exactly that, and like, I'll be like, let's just look at your breath, and saying that versus
which is universal.
Dance. Yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, helps them kind of be like, okay, we're just looking at what my breath is doing right now. Mm-hmm. What is that doing?
Mm-hmm.
Way less intimidating.
Yeah. Well, and talking about intimidating, our second listener says, I'm in therapy right now, but I often feel like finding the words to share about myself is too challenging, and it makes me anxious. In dance movement therapy, do I have to come up with things to say?
No, you never have to come up with anything to say, actually, which is kind of ironic and funny, right? No.
You're just appealing to the masses right now. Right? You're like, wait, we don't have to talk?
No, technically, this, this individual, they wouldn't have to come and say anything. I might ask them some questions about their experience of what happened, but they wouldn't actually have to come and say, I am feeling blank, 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 blank.
Right.
Yeah.
I might just be like, what's going on in your body? Does any part feel uncomfortable? Like, are you holding anything anywhere? And they just have to answer, and if they don't know, we'll talk about that.
Right. Yeah, when we think about, as you mentioned, Tara, intimidating, the idea of movement for some people might be intimidating. The idea of movement might be the answer for some people who talking is intimidating.
Yeah. For sure.
That being able to reflect on your week or bring things to talk therapy, this might be the modality that they've been waiting for because there's not an expectation of having things that you have to prepare and say.
Yeah.
Well, we are already at the end of our show for today. Wow.
Girl,
thank you for listening
amazing.
this morning. Join us next week as we talk through your questions on navigating romantic relationships. We will have a local couples therapist join the show. And in the week ahead, everyone, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness. And your voice is absolutely one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some go, some will, some won't. I wanna feel just